Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second part of a conversation with comics creator Stefano Gaudiano. Stefano, thank you for jumping in, joining, and talking with me again for a few minutes. Thank you for coming back.
Thank you for having me again.
I believe we were talking last time about some of your creative history and some of the people that you've collaborated with. So anything that you'd like to say by means of sort of closing that part of the interview, and then we can talk about some different topics.
Yeah, I wish I was going to take notes, and then this week I didn't have a chance to prepare. There were a couple of things that I thought, oh, I should have mentioned that, but I think I hit most of the marks. And I know that I wanted to also mention one of my favorite writers is actually Steve Sutora's one. He did work back in the 90s on, like he worked for Caliber and he worked on the self-published magazine that we did in Denver. And he's one of those writers that writes from a place that is, maybe more personal, not in terms of autobiography, but in terms of um, there's something that comes out that feels less commercial, and that's I know that one of the questions that you had when you invited me to be part of a podcast is what kind of stories do I like, and it's hard to describe, but I guess it's stories that somehow touch upon some of the deeper aspects of the human experience are things that I love, and I think it's pretty. Some writers can do that in the sort of monthly comics medium, but it's not an easy thing to do when you're really trying to entertain people month after month, and you're giving new new adventures. You can spill into just doing entertainment, which is great, but if there's something more going on, I always appreciate that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's it. So yeah, we can probably move on from. Oh, and actually, I mentioned to you before I think the recording went on. Gary Reed was a publisher of Caliber Press, and he really made a big difference in my career, and I think in a lot of people's careers. And just providing a platform for young artists to build their skills, and then a lot of people like Phil Hester, Brian Bendis moved on and had very successful careers and continue to have successful careers in mainstream comic books. And
Yeah.
that's it for shout outs, I think. And I wanted to mention Gary. Gary, was really great guy. I know that, just like doing business with people, not everybody felt that they were treated fairly by him, but I think at heart, he really just wanted to provide a place for artists to tell stories that we wouldn't have been able to tell if I had to wait for the gatekeepers to open the doors, at the other publishers. And J.O. Barr was probably, I think, his first comic book was The Crow. And that obviously had a big impact on both, comics and broader culture, I would say. So, Gary was great, and that's about it. Yeah, as far as collaborations, and I probably had to mention Bob Schreck. He was also like one of the people that helped a lot of people along, myself included, early in the day. I remember him taking time to talk me through a crisis when I wasn't even working for it. It was like I was working for Jim Shooter's company, another person that I think I just really enjoyed working for, but I didn't have a kind of relationship with Jim Shooter where I could call him up and ask for help when I was having creative block. And I remember one night I was desperate and I called Bob, who was working at Darkers at the time, and he just took the time to talk me off the ledge. So
Nice.
thank you, Bob.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard Bob Schreck's name on here several times as being somebody that's been supportive, and so that's great to hear. In your work, as you're thinking about bringing pages to visual life, and I've been thinking about your work since last we talked with The Walking Dead and DC Comics work and Stephen King's work. What's the approach that you take creatively, depending on the project?
Well, when I'm inking, I always read the script, and I just have to get into the story because I think I take inking pretty seriously, probably too seriously, and I think that there's ways that you can actually really help tell the story through subtleties, and sometimes it's just as simple as the script helps me to understand what the penciler is trying to do. Occasionally there's some minor unclarity, so I just read the script, and then as an inker, I just usually I'll look through pencils, but you know, the whole book as it comes in. But sometimes pages come in, you know, in small chunks, so I'll just take a look at the page. And I don't necessarily figure out, every once in a while, I will do a small thumbnail where I plan kind of my light and dark placements. But
Hmm.
for the most part, I just jump in and sometimes, like in the case of Charlie, he's got everything worked out. Like he knew exactly, you know, I don't think there was a time when I went and spotted a black that Charlie hadn't indicated. But some artists need a little bit more leeway. And then I had the, you know, pleasure of working with Michael on one of the Daredevil arcs as a finisher, where he was just giving
Hmm.
me layouts, and that gave me more responsibility. And so I obviously, in that case, I made sure to plan my pages a little bit better. So after I do that, a lot of it is, I mean, the main work is just trying to get in this flow where whatever inspiration is, it starts going through me and getting on the page. And I rely on whiteout quite a bit. Like before
Hmm.
computers, you know, it was just you had to use some kind of correction fluid, and my tool of choice was just these little whiteout pans. First, I used to use the old brushes that ancient people used for typewriters. You know, when you made mistakes on a typewriter, you had this little brush to fix it, and I used that for illustration. Then eventually they made these whiteout pans, and I found that I really like having this kind of freedom to get a little rougher and then clean it up, and then the whiteout will create some effects. And it takes more time, and I have to take that time because I'm not good enough to really get it right the first time. Unless I have someone like Charlie that's really given me all the information, I have to kind of feel the drawing as I go on.
Hmm.
So you know, just to go through that, and finally. Well, back in the day, it was just erase a page and make sure you didn't screw up anything too badly. Now you have the opportunity of scanning the page, and it's almost expected, I think, that you give it a once over, clean up what needs to be cleaned up that didn't scan properly or wasn't quite right on the page. And on Walking Dead, I ended up probably taking almost as much time on the computer as I did on the paper, because just on paper everything was there. But on the computer, I would go in and make little adjustments. And that's about it for inking. With penciling, I was just running into an old notebook from when I was doing my very first self-published story. And in
Hmm.
that case, we didn't have any writers that were working with us, so we had to write the material ourselves. So I I didn't do a panel by panel breakdown, but basically, you know, and I think this would be the case even if I was working on someone else's story. If there's not established characters already, design the characters, and if there are established characters, make sure you have the correct reference, and think about the location. When I was young, that first story, I actually had this grandiose idea that I was going to draw a map of the whole city where this was taking place, this imaginary city, and then quickly gave up on that and realized it was never going to get done. But you know, it helped me when I just to kind of get a sense of what the environment was, and I would do that again, even if I wasn't writing the story myself. A lot of times, you know, you're given something, and you're going to need to either do research and find out exactly what does Rockefeller Center look like, or let your imagination build
Hmm.
what the writer is trying to convey. And yeah, so it's you think about your characters, you think about your stage. That's what I do anyway. And then I don't spend probably enough time, and I think it's one of the things that's kept me from being a very efficient penciler. I haven't found that I have the capacity to just sit there and think about storytelling. It's something that just kind of happens as it goes along, you know, and just
Hmm.
every scene, every page. Usually, I'll think of a panel count that I want to do if a writer hasn't broken it down already into panels. Then I start thinking about, based on what's going on in the page, what type of panel shapes I want to have. If I want to go with something more regular or something, you know, more just dynamic, like what Jim Colin used to do on Daredevil,
Hmm.
or something really weird, you know, if you want to go in that direction. And Once I have the frames in place, that's kind of the first creative act, is sort of create a space where you can put what you're wanting to display. Once that's in place, I'll block out probably pages. If I rarely would block out a whole story at the outset. So yeah, I block out the pages and then let the drawing just kind of indicate what the composition is going to be as it happens, and then at the end I'll step back and see if I need to add some shadows or anything. But of course I have to make sure that all the details of the story are there. And I get pretty meticulous, just if the writer is saying, I want this, and this, I like to put everything that the writer asks for.
Mm-hmm.
I found that there's some artists that I really respect that are very good at actually editing down what the writer wants. I remember when I was working on Gotham Central, I had just struggled to fill in for Michael when Michael Lark went to Marvel and started working on he did Captain America, filled in a couple of other things, and then the Daredevils series. And I stayed on as inker at Gotham Central, and there was a few months gap before the artist that was going to be taking over the book, Cano, really great Spanish artist, could take over. And I hadn't drawn monthly comic books, maybe never, because when I think, well, yeah, I guess for a long time anyway, about 10 years.
Mm.
And I decided to take a stab at it, and I really was taking way too long on it. I might have told you the story last time we talked even. It was just, like one of the traumatic experiences in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kano started working on the book. And I remember in particular, I was just kind of wowed. He's a really great artist, but there was this panel where I'm looking at the script, and Greg has described this very elaborate scene where there's, maybe 12 characters. And it's like, this character that was a news reporter and had withheld some information that the police wanted, was essentially getting busted by the police. So there's police cars, police, all of this different stuff. And I'm envisioning in my head, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I am so happy that I don't have to draw this, right? This would just take me forever to figure out and to do, and I would stumble on it. And then kind of delivers the page. And, this was like kind of a big panel that was supposed to introduce the scene. And he did it all in silhouette, and it worked beautifully. It was great. He cut out all of the unnecessary details and just nailed what the story wanted to tell. And yeah, I think I got lost in the weeds. And the better comic book artists, people are working like the Alex Stoth vein, and it's and Michael, I think, was great at that. It's just keep it simple. Sean Phillips is excellent at that. Just tell the story and don't get too fancy, and move it forward, and it looks great. And there you go. But yeah, the way I work, I tend to put a lot of thought into those sorts of things, and I try to be very respectful of what the story wants. And the few times that I've written my own material, I tend to put a lot of detail, and it slows things down. Yeah.
Now, I'm curious about what currently has your creative attention. Is there anything that you're working on at the moment that you'd like to share that you can share about?
Yes and no. Probably more no than yes. It's like I've thought about this, and it's I'm in transition.
Mm-hmm.
I've done a couple of small inking jobs in the last few years, but my last big job was Deceased, the first volume, and I, I think since I've done the first one, Ben had reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in doing the follow-up books, and I was going through some. The Walking Dead had just ended. I just finished the first volume of Deceased. Both of those books were really great in terms of the page rate was great on The Walking Dead, because since Robert owns the property, it's not like with Marvel or DC where they have all this overhead and they have to keep the rates low. Robert can afford to pay based on sales of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Walking Dead sells phenomenally. I wasn't on a percentage basis, but he just set the rate really high. And because I live in Seattle, I think we probably talked last week about just like the difference, working in a place where the cost of living is really high is not great for working in comics because rates have not only stagnated, but actually have started to drop right now. Marvel and DC are paying less, even in terms of dollar amounts than they were paying, not just in terms of value, but like literally they pay less for starting artists than they were in the early 2000s and late 90s. And I completely understand it. I don't blame them. Sales are not as good as they used to be. And they have, as I think I went over last time we talked, they have a lot of really great artists available around the world that can afford to make a good living on what Marvel and DC pays. But for myself, living in Seattle, The Walking Dead, I knew was a book that would allow me to make ends meet. And when Robert decided to finish the story, I had a little bit of warning, and I knew that I was going to need to do something different. Deceased came on, and I was going to do that because at first it was like, well, it's a 6-issue series. We have some other ideas in mind, but we don't know if it's going to go well or not. So can you commit to 6 issues? And I asked who's drawing it. He said Trevor Herson, and it's like, okay, I got to do it, even if I didn't think the money was going to be that great. I took the job, and then the money turned out to be really good because the book just sold like gangbusters. And at DC, they do give some royalties on top of the page rate. The page rate was good by DC standards, but not quite enough for me to really keep it as an ongoing assignment in Seattle. But for that first book, the royalties made up, and I got the income that I needed for the months that I put into it. But I pretty much knew that I couldn't sustain my career as an inker much longer because you're not always going to get books that sell great, and you can't even tell, which ones are going to sell great or not. It's just like at this point, the market is not predictable to most people, certainly not to me. So I knew I couldn't count on royalties to make up the gap between the normal wages and what I need. And I thought, I'm going to need to just do something else. And I've always been interested in 3D illustration, but I never learned how to use the tools to create 3D art. So I actually signed up to study 3D art. And my thought was, I'm going to go into video games or something like that, and just where I can get maybe a salary and take care of a problem that way. But all this stuff was going on in life, and the short of it is I wasn't able to. I actually signed up for the course, but I wasn't able to actually even go to the first class. I just got wrapped up in all these different things going on in my life with traveling to Italy. My parents were getting older, deaths in the family, and meanwhile my kids, just like had their needs that needed to be tended to. My wife, who had previously been spending more time at home, went back to work, so she wasn't around to do as much around the house, and I just wasn't able to concentrate on work at all. And in that time, I started thinking about different things. I volunteered to help an organization called National Cares to put together an after-school program on Zoom. They had this after-school program for kids that needed to be moved to the Zoom platform when COVID hit. And they had hit upon this idea of like, well, what can we do with kids on Zoom? How do we keep them engaged? And we thought, well, let's see if we can get them engaged in like making comics. And they didn't really have any idea of what they were doing. So they reached out locally, and word got to me because I wasn't necessarily the most qualified person, but people knew that I had an interest in that sort of work anyway. I had been, volunteering with some nonprofits already. And that was a great experience, actually. And I ended up, basically for a few months, once or twice a week, I was with this incredible group of kids that were creating their own characters and telling their own stories. And, not all of them would draw, but I told them, if you don't want to draw, just go and find images online that kind of, look like what you want to say. And of course, there wasn't time to actually do comic book, but there was enough time to have them think about a story and plot outlines. They broke up in groups, and I really enjoyed that. And I was kind of excited, actually. I think I might have reached out to Dark Horse or somebody because I thought that it could have been the basis for a line, basically, because it's like, here you have this kids that are specifically the organization that ran this is called National Cares, and if you look them up online, basically they target groups that need special attention. And so, as a story writers, they had a really unique perspective. And I'm not going to get into all the details of it now, but it was really vibrant stuff. And I mean, like this one kid like came up with a character that I just thought was amazing. It's that I'd have to go back and look at the notes, but I really liked that. And I thought, okay, maybe I can just pivot and go into something that is more relational, dealing with the community. But of course, other than the fact that I'm leaving tomorrow. I got to go to Italy. I'm happy to go to Italy, but it's just, there's some family responsibilities that I have to take there. Um, I also saw, well, even if I concentrated on doing this type of work, I'm not going to make any more money doing this than I would be inking. It's not social work, does not pay, basically. So I, had my antenna out, and randomly, a guy named Bonelli Magno, I don't know if you know who he is. He was a talent relations guy at Marvel when I was working at Marvel. And he had been asked in this kind of network way by somebody that he wasn't even working for to suggest artists for a project that was, needed an artist by a writer who had not worked in comics before, but had, a platform in actually a musician that wanted to, had this story that he wanted to expand that had nothing to do with music, but it was just this really cool project that he has in mind. And my work, and I was kind of surprised by this because I hadn't really drawn comics much, and I was thinking, like, what did they see? Did they actually see my work, or were they looking at Michael's work, or were they looking at Lee Weeks, or I've had people think that I drew The Walking Dead because my name is somewhere in there, and they're like, "Oh, you draw Walking Dead?" It's like, yeah, that's actually Charlie. If you want that, that's Charlie. So I had to double check and make sure that they were thinking about the right person. But I had a meeting with the author, and it went really well. We really hit it off, and I got very excited about doing that story. That story is actually still an active concern. So that's one of the things that I can't talk about because it's not, taken shape yet. But the reason why I'm so kind of, wiggly about it is that I've had this story on my table for a really long time. And the only progress that I've made is on that kind of world building part. It's set in the real world. And I've actually like traveled to research places and, studied like what the background of this character would be, got really deep into it to the point that at some point I had a Zoom call with the author and his team. And I said, I'm taking so long on this, you might be better off finding someone else. And they said, well, yeah, we see what you're saying, but we're not really in a hurry. And you sound so excited about it. You've done all this stuff. And it's true. I'm just like, yeah, but if I'm not going to do it at this point, I'm waiting to see. And I don't think I have it in me to kick into gear and actually draw this. But I'm waiting to see if there's a way that I can maybe art direct it before they just pull the plug and decide that they're giving up on me. And there's an artist in Italy that I'd like to collaborate with on that. So that's one of the projects that I can't really talk about that's sort of in back burner. Then there's something that I'd like to put together with one of the editors that I've worked with before that would be, just kind of an independent project where I would serve as a sort of, in my mind, that would be sort of art directing, but really what he wants is to have me ink an array of younger artists to keep a certain consistency in this work that he wants to produce. And I like that idea a lot. I think that would be interesting, but it's moving at a very slow pace. I haven't actually started any work. It's still in the talk stage. Ben Abernathy at DC actually had kindly invited me to pencil and ink the Penguin series that Tom King started last year, and we actually made the announcement. And I dropped the ball. I mean, it's on me undoubtedly. Although I have to say that they actually announced me on the book, and they announced the book before I had formally agreed, and before there was a script. So, it's like we found ourselves in this situation, and this happens a lot in comics. So it's something that, I think that what Ben was hoping is that me being an old pro, I would be able to just run it, right? But I'm really an old pro as an inker. As a penciler, I just have not done enough work to get into that groove. There's only one series, the one that I did with Steve Siegel, my first series that I was able to do on a monthly basis. Everything else has taken longer, right? And in the end, basically, I had to drop out of the project, or rather be kicked out of the project. I think, it's like we can split the difference. Maybe I was in contact with Ben, and I said, Ben, can you give me like 2 more weeks to just like show you what I'm doing? And he's like, I don't think we have that. So that's how it went. And but that is to say that I still dabble. I can't remember if the last thing I did was a Red Hood with Tony Akins, or if it was something else. I still dabble in the industry, but it's not something that I'm concentrating on as a career, because I haven't worked out exactly what I would be doing there. So, and creatively, there's a lot going on, and it's not so much, there's some stories, but it's more nonfiction stuff. There's a couple of things that I want to do. One of them is, and this would be more of a written project than a graphic novel. It's something that, I'm trying to compose an essay on basically socio-historical dynamics that I think are not as clear as they need to be, and basically more of an academic thing. And then I'm interested. It's funny. There's the piece I just noticed behind me is not mine. That's my daughter's art, Sabina. But it kind of looks like some of the visual stuff that I'm interested in. What I'm doing now visually is more geometric type art. I'm interested in geometry in general, and once I realized that there's this visualizations that you can do them in 2D, but you can really do them in 3D better, that essentially allow us to kind of visualize a fourth dimension in the same way that when we look at a two-dimensional piece of paper, you can see 3 dimensions implicitly. On a three-dimensional canvas, so to speak, it's possible to actually draw something that allows us to perceive that higher dimension in the same way that when you draw on paper, the simplest thing is like, you have this little hexagon with some lines in it, and you can see, oh, that's a cube, and if you put that in 3 dimensions and you do the kind of thing where the hexagon with lines, and I apologize for everybody that hates geometry, but the hexagon with lines represents a cube with 6 square faces. Tesseract, which would be a 4-dimensional square, basically, is a hypercube that has 8 3-dimensional faces. It's basically 8 cubes that contain the substance that is 4-dimensional substance. And people have drawn that in 2 dimensions, but again, I want to see that or do that in 3 dimensions and start to help the eye actually get what that means, because it's very hard to imagine, like, what the heck does a figure with 8 cubes bounding it look like? Interestingly, as far as I can tell, it looks a lot like Spider-Man's mask. And that blew my mind. When I ran into that, it was just like, oh, okay, it's a web. It's just like, great, Ditko was really onto something,
Sounds like it. Sounds like it.
So as you
It's
can see,
amazing.
all of my ideas are like, really going to make me rich down the line, right? It's just I'm trying to figure out what I can do that's actually practical, that's going to allow me to stay afloat in the long run. And like right now, I'm kind of, chugging along, but with the cost of living increasing, I'm going to need to get more productive and more focused on something that actually is viable. So that's to just what's the expression I'm looking for. We'll see what happens. Tune in next year or whatever. But I do hope the projects that I mentioned, particularly that story that I did all this research for, I'd love to pick up the reins on that again and eventually see that done, but I probably wouldn't be the one drawing it. So that's about it as far as what my creative creative gears are doing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, by means of a final question, if folks out there want to kind of see what you're working on,
Oh
stay
yeah,
connected, are there social media spots, websites that are most
I'll
active?
I just I mean I'm on Facebook, but I never go there, and I haven't posted anything. Same thing for Instagram. I haven't posted on Instagram. But Facebook is just my name, Stefano Gaudiano. For Instagram, it's Gaudiano Art, my last name, ART, all one word. And that same tag, Gaudiano Art, is my website. So it's gaudianoart.com, all one word, Gaudiano Art. And I haven't updated it because I really haven't had much of anything to update. I haven't done much. Also, I don't know whether I will have the patience to go in and do it. My wife set up the site. She's really good at that stuff, but I would have to maintain it myself. So when I do new work, hopefully I'll put new stuff in. But you can go over and it was great because she put in um, a lot of like basically there's a section that is my comic book work, both penciling and inking. There's a section that's illustration work that I've done, and then I think there's a section for storyboards and video game work. And because I've worked in all of the different fields, especially before I started inking regularly, it's actually kind of fun. Once in a while I'll go on just to browse. It's like, oh, I forgot about that job. Just so if anybody's interested in checking out my work or seeing more of my work that they might not have seen, guardianart.com is a good place to go. And it's also a good way to get in touch with me because there's a link there where you can essentially send me an email. And I just got something from there a few weeks ago. I don't people hardly ever write, but I know that it works. And other than that, yeah, Instagram, I don't check it very often, but I can be reached for Instagram as well.
You're right. Well, Stefano, thank you for the conversation, both parts of the conversation. I appreciate your work, and it sounds fascinating, and looking forward to seeing what is on the horizon, the
Yeah,
geometric horizon, even
yeah,
with
there
A
you go.
figures.
Perfect. I'll see if I can have that ready next time we talk.
Yeah, yeah.
All
Well,
right.
thank you so much, and glad to have you back anytime.
Thank you very much, and have a good rest of the week. I'll, see you hopefully at some event or on video in the next few years.